Shedeur Sanders can and will be successful with the Cleveland Browns if he does just one thing. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, and proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. Shedeur Sanders will find success at the NFL level with the Browns if he's willing to learn from his draft experience. Joe Flacco may be closer to being traded than actually starting for the Cleveland Browns. Plus, Quinshon Judkins will be the rookie that makes the biggest impact on the Browns in 2025. I'll explain why and more. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. And remember, you can find Cleveland Browns content with Locked On Browns every week, Monday through Friday, guaranteed, with bonus content on some weekends as well. And it's totally free to you. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And, of course, the Locked On Browns YouTube channel, where you can also get involved in the show by sharing your thoughts on anything we discussed today in the comment section. This is your team, so be part of the conversation every single day. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250, in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And I do believe Shedeur Sanders can and will be successful at the NFL level if he's willing to learn from his draft experience. Now, what I mean by that is come in, be a sponge, be receptive to criticism, be ready to learn, be coachable. And I want to be clear here because I know when you talk about Shedeur and his personality and how this pre-draft process went and what we've heard about how this pre-draft process went, it can be a little triggering. It can be a little, people obviously take offense to hearing some of the things that are being said about Shedeur, and I understand why. And I want to be clear. I think Shedeur is capable of all those things I mentioned: being a sponge, being receptive to criticism, being ready to learn, being coachable. But I do think teams doubting his ability to do those things and doubting his ability to accept those things and come in and just kind of be willing to learn is part of the reason, or are part of the reason, why he wasn't drafted higher and why he slipped to the 5th round, where the Browns ended up taking him with pick 144. That doesn't mean that it's true about him, but that was the perception that these teams some teams clearly had about him as a player and as a person, and people weren't willing to sign up for that. Like, we can dispute all, to the cows come home, whether or not we believe everything that's being said about Shedeur and his character and how we botched these meetings and all these different things. I think there must be some truth to that. And I've been saying this, like how did we get it so wrong with Shedeur Sanders? And the easy answer is, well, we're not scouts and we're not draft experts and we're not this and we're not that. And we don't have all the information. And that's probably fair. But here's the thing, Mel Kiper, for example. Mel Kiper is somebody who is as dialed in to the draft as anybody every single year. There's others too. Daniel Jeremiah, all these guys. They're all dialed into the NFL draft process. They have sources that give them information. And the information they were given was that this guy was being talked about as a potentially first, most likely by the time the draft came around. I think we all were under the understanding that he might not be a first round pick though. And that's okay. But at the very least, the consensus was he was going to be a day 2 guy. He was going to go 2nd round, maybe 3rd round. And that was going to be that. And that didn't even happen. And so the fact that these experts, these guys, some of who, Daniel Jeremiah used to be a scout. He used to work in an NFL front office. So he's as tapped into anybody as far as it goes, studying players and learning their games and breaking it down. So understanding that, the reason all of these guys were so off, and here's the thing, Mel Kiper, he was right about, he's never had, somebody was telling me, he got a bunch of his, like usual, he got a bunch of his picks right. He still knew generally where these guys are going to go. And then Jeremiah, same thing. He generally knew where most of these guys are going to go. So how did they get the projection wrong? It's not just they didn't know anything. No, they knew these guys are as tapped in as anybody. So it's not that I don't trust guys that are at the top of this business when it comes to draft experts, and that we should lose faith in them because they got this one wrong. I think it was just that these teams had more information than what they obviously did have. Again, they were as tapped in as anybody. They understood the value of where these players should go, but the difference is like they weren't in those meetings. Daniel Jeremiah, Mel Kiper, me, like none of us were in those meetings. And so something that went on in those meetings, whether it was his play recall or his calling of the play recall or whatever, because that was the thing, was apparently he didn't do too well with that in meetings. And apparently he bumped heads with Brian Dable, for example, with the New York Giants. Clearly there was things that went on in these meetings that knocked him down a peg or several pegs in terms of how teams felt about him. And there's no other way to slice it. Like that was what turned, I guess, a lot of people off to him, what turned some of these teams off to him. And I think it gave off this image or this sense that he wasn't going to be coming to the NFL willing to learn, and that he wasn't quite, like, he didn't have the football IQ maybe that people wanted. I'm not saying he doesn't have that. I think he does. And I've been talking this entire draft process about how I think I'm not worried about the character. I'm not worried about the personality. I think it's actually a good thing for him to be in Cleveland with that personality, because there's a long history of failed quarterbacks that he has to sort of now rise to the top of and find a way to be successful. And he very well could. I think he's ready for those things. I don't think the draft process probably was a little bit humbling to him. Now, he was asked in his conference call on Saturday if he regretted anything, and he said no. And I can understand that. Like, the Sanders family isn't a family that's going to sit there and like talk about living with regrets or feeling like they did things wrong or that they didn't go about things the right way. Like, what they did is what they did. Dion, sort of was acting as their agent. He tried to sort of promote and boost his son's stock. He talked about him going in the top 3, and that's where they thought they were going to go. And it didn't work out the way that they wanted, but I can understand not having any regrets about it, because you live and you learn. But in that same vein, like, I do feel like I'm not going to go as far as saying there was some collusion from the league here to not draft Shedeur Sanders. I'm trying to be very clear so people don't jump in the comments and tell me that I'm talking crazy. I'm not saying that there was collusion going on, but I do think these NFL teams felt like, because of how his pre-draft process went, they were sort of trying to prove a point that, like, you got to earn it here. You're not just going to show up and be this day one starter because you have good genes. Like, you have to earn it. And by being a 5th round pick, he's going to have to now earn everything. So I do think that this pre-draft process will sort of be a little humbling to him, and that it will allow him to come in. He already had a chip on his shoulder, because I think the Sanders family, anybody in that family, always is going to play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. And I think Shedeur is no different. But he's going to come in and he's going to sort of work to prove, like, this could end up being like a mistake for 31 other teams, right? Like, hey, you let me slip. All these other teams passed on me for multiple rounds. You could have had me, and now I'm going to come prove why I was more worthy of going earlier in this draft. I think that's the sort of attitude he's going to have, and I do think he's going to be willing to learn. I also think, like, and part of the optics of Shedeur Sanders and him not maybe having the right mentality or being sort of willing to be a sponge, if you will, I think it stems from the fact that he's only ever played for his dad, right? He played for his dad at Jackson State. He played for his dad at Colorado. And so people feel like maybe there's coaches that aren't like, maybe there's a hesitancy to feel like you can be hard on him because he's not used to that or whatever. I just, like, you got to give him a chance to prove it, right? And I think he will. I think he's ready for that challenge. I think this experience was probably a little bit humbling to him, whether he has regrets or not. And I think he understands what it's going to take to prove that from 5th round pick Shedeur Sanders to maybe NFL starting quarterback Shedeur Sanders, he's going to have to earn whatever journey he is in front of him, he's going to have to earn it. And I do think he can be successful if he comes in and he learns from the draft experience and he's willing to sit down and take the criticism and be coached. And I see a guy that I think can do those things and will do those things and work hard to be great. Because that is the number one thing you can't deny about Shedeur Sanders, is that he absolutely positively wants to be great at football at the next level. And so I think he'll do what he needs to do that, especially knowing he's now got he's now got a lot more to prove because he was a 5th round pick rather than a 2nd round pick or a 1st round pick. along those lines, this quarterback battle is going to dominate the conversation for much of the offseason. I actually, as I thought about it more, feel like Joe Flacco is closer to being traded than closer to starting for the Cleveland Browns in 2025. I will talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place a $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, $250 in bonus bets if you bet throughout the NBA playoffs. You can take the Cleveland Cavaliers right now, who are red hot, coming off a sweep of the Miami Heat, one of the most lopsided, I think the most lopsided playoff series of all time. And guess what? As they move on to the next round, I'll be throwing some money their way against the Indiana Pacers. What's fun, too, is after the game tips off, you can combine live prop bets on the Cavaliers into same-game parlays with other games for a chance to win big. I love how FanDuel makes it so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props, to earn money, bet money, and cash out my money when it's all said and done. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That's $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com. All right, so in lieu of talking about why I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be successful at the next level, we know that there's going to be a very fascinating quarterback conversation competition that plays out over the month in the months ahead. It starts during offseason program, veteran minicamp, and then ultimately into training camp, obviously later this summer, where we'll get an official starter at some point. And I know that Joe Flacco was brought in to sort of be this steadying presence, this veteran, this elder statesman of the group who's been there, seen some things, done some things, and has a chance to, just keep this thing on the tracks for a season if he is the starter. I've also been saying, though, I don't envision Joe Flacco at 41 playing all 17 games for the Browns next year. Like, you're going to probably see every single one of these quarterbacks in some capacity in 2025. I'm putting that on. I'm saying that on the record now. I think that's how it's probably going to go down. I don't see how like a 41-year-old, like, yes, 2023 lightning in a pan, 5-game sample size, he was great. Can you do that over the course of a 17-game season? I'm going to bet not. And so the Browns owe it to themselves too, now that they have two guys that they drafted, to see what these players, these young guys, are going to look like. And so here's the thing. If I'm the Browns and you're in sort of this rebuilding phase, they're better off trying to see what they have in those two young guys that they use draft capital on, mind you, than holding on to an aging veteran and just hoping like, well, hey, he'll get us to the playoffs. So no matter what, whether it's Flacco, whether it's Kenny Pickett, I think whoever that veteran starter is, like, I do think they'll start the season with one of those guys starting at quarterback. And then it'll transition to at some point in the season, like, well, the season's not going great. We need to change. Let's find a spark in Dylan Gabriel. Let's find a spark in Shedeur Sanders, whichever it's going to be. And so I bring up Kenny Pickett's name. This is why his presence on this team is another reason why I think it's more likely Flacco gets traded than ends up starting long-term for the Browns next season. Like, yes, Flacco is here to kind of keep this thing together. The rookies are the plan for the future. The Browns have to find a way to sort of balance both those things. They have to find a balance between, hey, we're going to start this season trying to be competitive and give you something to cheer for and be excited about, and not just make it look like we're throwing in the towel on 2025. But in the same breath, they also do have to think about what the future looks like, where they end up draft-wise next year. Because if they're really going to draft that franchise quarterback, they're probably going to want to know that they're in position to draft their guy early in the draft yet again. So understanding all those things, like, there's a fine line here that they're walking to try to navigate their future while also being competitive in the now with players like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward, etc., in their prime. So I understand where, from that standpoint, it's like, well, Flacco should be the starter. He should come in. He should, be the steadying presence, be the starter, just keep this thing on the tracks for a season and all that. But again, I don't envision him playing all season long. even if he does stay, they make the team. But I more than anything, because I do think a veteran will start the year at quarterback for the reasons I laid out. Trying to sell the fan base on staying competitive, trying to sell your team on staying competitive. And it'll be one of those things like last year where you get to a point in the season, quarterback play isn't there, and Kevin Stefanski's kind of forced to make a change because he realizes we got to get a spark in some capacity, and this thing's a sinking ship. I just think they're more inclined to do that with Kenny Pickett. I think back to Andrew Berry saying that the room's going to skew younger. That is very true in this setup right now. But even if if you get rid of Joe Flacco, then you got 3 guys all under 30. 2 of them are rookies who you're sort of trying to see who can seize that role and what you got in the future, and the 2 young guys that you have. So it would skew extremely young if that was the case. And I think this is just kind of the hand that you were dealt, given how Kirk Cousins didn't become a realistic option, all these different things. But the reason, the way that Kevin Stefanski has talked about, and even Andrew Berry, Kenny Pickett throughout the last couple of months, owners meetings, since he signed at the beginning of the new league year, they've all kind of gushed about his ability to start and how they like what he brings to the table, and how he has a lot of experience having come from Philly now, where he won a Super Bowl as the backup, all these different things. They've talked about him so glowingly. And I know you're not going to bash your own player, obviously, but they've gone above and beyond talking about Kenny Pickett and what he brings to the table, trying to build up his confidence. And so it feels like he has a legitimate shot to win this job. I don't know that people realize that, but he's got a legitimate chance to be the starting quarterback week 1. And if that happens, I think then somebody like Flacco becomes expendable. And let's face it, Andrew Berry the last 2 years has tried to trade quarterbacks at the end of training camp. He did it with Josh Dobbs in 2023. He did it last year where he floated Jameis Winston as somebody they would trade, but ultimately, and then also were trying to trade Tyler Huntley at the same time, and then ultimately had to just cut Tyler Huntley, and they kept Jameis Winston because nobody was biting on the trade requests. So understanding this is how Andrew Berry's done things, my best guess is that if you get to the end of training camp and there's somebody really desperate for a veteran quarterback because somebody gets hurt, and this happens every year, then Flacco becomes the one that you sort of float in a trade, and Kenny Pickett then starts the year as your starting quarterback. And I know that might not be exciting to a lot of people. Like I said, they still do have to sell to the fan base that they're trying to win football games here. But I also think they realize even competent quarterback play, which I think you can get with Kenny Pickett. I think you get competent quarterback play with Kenny Pickett more so than you had last year with the gaggle of quarterbacks that they starting with Deshaun Watson, and you saw some life with Jameis Winston. But I think they are looking at it from a sense of if we just get consistent quarterback play, better, maybe somebody who protects the football better than Jameis Winston, but that can at least throw the ball around the field a little bit, I think we'll be okay. And I think we have a chance to at least be competitive, because they realized how uncompetitive they were strictly because of how bad the offense was a year ago. And so I think they might believe they can get that from Kenny Pickett, at least for part of the season. And then if things go really south, that's when you pivot to the rookies and see what either of those guys gives you as you prepare for 2026 to sort of see, all right, what are our options? Are we going to go quarterback? Are we not? Et cetera, et cetera. So if they ultimately trade somebody, I think Flacco's the guy. I just have a hard time seeing them move on from Dylan Gabriel, even if Shedeur has a better camp than Dylan Gabriel. I don't know what they move on from him as a 3rd round pick. You can't use a 3rd round pick on a guy and then be cutting him at the end of training camp. So I think Dylan Gabriel is I don't want to say safe, because nobody's ever truly safe. You just never know. But I don't know that Dylan Gabriel is safer because of where he was picked than anybody else in this room. Shedeur, because he's a 5th round pick, a lot of times 5th round picks are fighting for roster spots anyway. So maybe he's on the chopping block in some respect, but I still believe they'd be more inclined to keep a guy that they used a draft pick on, even if it's a 5th round pick, than one of those top 2 guys in Flacco or Pickett. If one loses assuming one loses the job to the other, and one's going to lose the job to the other because only one can start at the beginning of the year. So we'll see. But if I'm thinking through Andrew Berry's philosophy, how he's handled things at the end of training camp at the quarterback position, he's going to probably float somebody out there in a trade. The question comes down to, is it Flacco? Is it Pickett? Or is it one of the rookies, which I think would be a little more far-fetched? Maybe not if it's Shedeur and he has a really good camp and you're just like, yeah, we're not going to keep him. But I think they'd still be more inclined to trade one of the veterans than over the rookies. And so it comes down to who is more likely to be flipped in a trade, and I think it'd be Flacco for a quarterback desperate team than Kenny Pickett. We'll see how it plays out. There's a lot to still unfold here, obviously, but that's where my head is at today at the end of April with this idea that Flacco may not even be here to quarterback this team next year, and that very well could play out with how this competition sorts itself out in the coming months. Speaking of rookies, we've talked so much about Shedeur Sanders, obviously, the last couple of days, but the most impactful rookie to the Browns' results in 2025 is going to be Quinshon Judkins. I'll explain why coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. Take advantage of their all-in-one convenience. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. And managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. My wife and I have tried this, considering we have a growing family. We're trying to find ways to cut our spending and make sure we have more money to use on family things. So you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals the same way that we have. Managing money is managing money out of your hands with the control of your finances under Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, so I do believe Quinshon Judkins of the rookie class has the chance to be the most impactful of the members of this rookie class the Browns brought in 2025. Now, I know what people are going to say. You see the Ohio State Buckeyes helmet behind me. You see the Brutus behind me. You know I'm an Ohio State fan. And you know, if you've listened to this podcast regularly, that I've been on the Quinshon Judkins train for months. Like, since the end of the college football season, I've been saying, that's my guy. Kareem Hunt clone, seeks out contact, and a run guys over. I am excited about the prospect of Quinshon Judkins being on this team, watching him every week, covering him every week, and what he brings to the table, what he brings to this offense in Cleveland. And so I know people are going to just say, well, you're biased as a Buckeyes fan, but I promise you, I have thought this thing through more so than just being like, well, I love Quinshon Judkins because he played for the Buckeyes. So let me explain here, so I don't just end the show with you thinking I'm just gushing over a Buckeye. But so listen, the Browns love to run the football. We know this. And going back to the purest form of Kevin Stefanski's offense, this wide zone scheme, West Coast system, a lot of a lot of outside zone concepts and things. When Kevin Stefanski's offense has been its most successful, think back like 2020, 2021, 2022, even 2023, they took a step back because there was a lot of passing with Flacco and all that, especially at the end of the year. But when this offense has been at its best, and when it wasn't trying to be something it wasn't, or be something it's not with Deshaun Watson, it was when the run game was their greatest asset, the strength of the offense. Think Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt splitting carries, these long runs from Chubb where he's just like sprinting away from people. That's the offense that theoretically they're trying to get back to. And so Judkins has a chance to deliver that. And because listen, I think somebody like Mason Graham is a tremendously talented player. He was a top 5 player in this class. I have no qualms, as I've said numerous times, with the Mason Graham pick. And I do think he's going to have an impact next season, especially understanding, well, hey, Myles Garrett's going to be over here getting double teamed, triple teamed even. He's going to have a chance to wreak havoc in the middle of that front because there's so much attention paid to Myles Garrett. So I do think Mason Graham is going to be an impactful player. I do think Mason Graham is going to make his presence felt almost immediately on this team, on this defense, under Jim Schwartz's guidance. Like, I'm excited for Mason Graham as well. And listen, ultimately, the answer could end up being somebody like Shedeur or somebody like Dylan Gabriel if that pick sticks and either of those quarterbacks turns out to be great. Of course, quarterback is always going to win out as the most impactful position in players. So I understand where that could come to fruition too if one of these quarterbacks plays quicker or earns the job really fast here and can be the starter week one. I don't foresee that happening, which is why I'm going in a different direction. But I can concede that yes, if one of these quarterbacks takes that job, they will ultimately go down probably as the most impactful player of the 2025 season. But I'm not envisioning either of them starting at least in the beginning of the season. And for that reason, I wasn't trying to rhyme there, I swear. To me, the answer is Quinshon Judkins because they're going to get back to the basics of Kevin Stefanski's offense. They're going to be a run-heavy team. They are going to run the football and try to run the football effectively with an offensive line that has had plenty of success running the football over the years, even as they've gotten older. That has been pretty much true. So I do think there is a good chance that Quinshon ends up being so important to this offense and scoring a bunch of touchdowns, going over 1,000 yards. I'm already predicting he'll be 1,000 yards this year, 8 touchdowns maybe. I think he's going to have a really productive rookie season because he's coming in at the perfect time. Browns are sort of resetting things. They're going back to what they do well. Stefanski's going back to what he does well. And they have a running back that I think can lead that group and in Quinshon Judkins and immediately come in and start and play for this team and start doing a lot of things. So productively. So I understand where you hear it from a Buckeye fan and you're just going to say, you're going to write it off because you think I'm just being biased. But I swear it's not that. As I just kind of survey this team and the positions that they added, again, if they had gotten Cam Ward, the answer would have been Cam Ward, and I probably wouldn't even be doing this conversation on the pod because it wouldn't be worth it. We don't know what the answer was going to be. It would be 100% resigningly Cam Ward. You took a first-round pick quarterback. Of course, that player is going to start pretty quickly here and have a chance to really impact the results in year one. But the Browns took quarterbacks in the 3rd round and the 5th round. So I'm not necessarily banking on either of those guys starting immediately. And with that understanding, I know what the Browns' bread and butter is under Kevin Stefanski. I know when they've been their most successful offensively and as a team, it's when they had a good dominant run game. Quinshon is going to be the headliner of that. There'll be some Jerome Ford worked in, probably on 3rd downs, especially as a pass catcher, because he is a good pass catching back. And you also will have Dylan Sampson, who's part of this group as well. Maybe we can hold out hope for Nick Chubb. I'm not doing that at this point because, as I talked about, I think the way they handled the draft this past weekend showed you that they have kind of closed that door and they're moving forward without Nick Chubb. But maybe he comes back and can still have an impact as well. But I think Judkins is the guy who's going to have the biggest workload, and especially for an offense that was miserable last year and couldn't score a lot of points, he's going to be looked upon as a guy to kind of carry that group and get a lot of reps immediately. So with that in mind, I think Judkins is the answer. Buckeyes fan or not, I think Judkins is the answer to who will be the most impactful rookie on the Browns this season. And we can revisit this conversation leading into at the end of training camp leading into the season to see if I stand by that or not, based off of once we actually see them out there on the field playing and what they're doing in practice and in preseason games. Maybe I'll change my opinion. But for now, I think Quinshon Judkins is resoundingly the answer for the most impactful rookie for the Browns in 2025. Another episode down with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me as always to talk about your favorite football team. We'll have more to come this week, hoping to pin down Harold Fannon's position coach at Bowling Green here in the coming days. So we'll see if that works out. We'd love to talk about him some more this week. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. And for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting, or you can keep it local. Check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thank you for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon, Cleveland. See you.